Yes, so we are here for the first session in a series of sessions. We had a call this year on papers that are using international scale assessment data, such as TIMSS, PISA, TALIS, ICCS, and so on. And we were very happy to see that we had a lot of contributions and many people that were interested in it. So we have 3 sessions. There will all be today, this one in the morning, and 2 in the afternoon for those interested particularly in this topic. And we will start today with a presentation of 4 presentations that will be rather diverse in terms of the data that we use. We have the TIMSS studies and the ICCS studies, for example. And we have a collection of authors from different universities. How I was thinking we could organize this is that each author has a maximum of 20 minutes of for presentation time, a maximum, so we can have afterwards immediately 10 minutes of discussion. I think that would work. So we will start with the first presentation. Shujun, I think, Chen. That is coming from the University of Bath and is presenting a paper co-authored with Ana Sandoval Fernandez, which we'll show soon.
So before I start, how can I show this button doesn't work?
Press this one.
This one?
Yes.
Okay. Oh great, that's how it works. The whole Italian keyboard is so confusing. Voice check. Hello. Hi everybody. Good morning. Thank you for coming here so early. My name is Zhijun Chen. Chen is the easier one, but if you want a little bit challenge, call me Zhijun. I come from the University of Bath from UK, and today I will be presenting one of my study, Identify Effective Teaching, from TIMSS 2019 to address all the educational inequalities that has been caused by student socio-economic status. And then we're going to have a further look at the details in Italy. And I have been working on this with my supervisor, Dr. Andres Hernandez, who is supposed to be here. Hopefully will be here soon.
Finishing his coffee.
Obviously, coffee is important. So the study is starting with the focus of a director relationship which has been established and confirmed since 1970s, I would say. And the relationship between student socio-economic status and the student achievement across different subjects has been identified at both individual level and the collective level. At the individual level, you can see that the parents, more wealthy and well-educated parents, will try to ensure their children's future success or future earnings by providing them a more favorable learning environment, better education, and good jobs. And at the group level, each individual belongs to a series of environments. It can be different communities, neighborhood, or school, or the smaller one, classroom, and their behavior and values are shaped by these environments. It is reasonable to also assume that the part of the effect are attributed to the socio-economic environment of the neighborhood. So while we are looking at these educational inequalities, which has been caused by socio-economic status at both levels, we are interested into whether teaching, which has been identified as one of the key factors in a school, which will normally have a significant or substantial impact on student achievement. We are interested into whether teaching can help eliminate, or maybe it would have the accelerate impacts in student, I would call that SES achievement gap. So for my study, I aspire to investigate the influences of teaching practices. To be more specific, I will be using 2 variables that come from TIMSS 2019, instructional clarity and classroom discipline, on the relationship between student socio-economic status and the math achievement across 45 countries that has been participating in TIMSS 2019 and providing the data for two variables. So my research will mainly focus on two questions. If you go for detail, it will in general 3 questions. So first, I will be looking at the equality opportunities. So we already have an assumption base is that there is an equality in achievement, in outcomes. So starting from my first question, I want to look at the equalities in opportunities. The opportunities to access to effective teaching. So I will be looking at is class mean SES associated with teaching practices. And the second one, based on the equality, potential equality in opportunities and the equality in outcomes, we try to see can teaching practices help reduce this SES learning gap. So first, I would look at the impact of the class mean SES on the achievement would be different. And the second, I will be looking at whether there is a cross-level interaction of teaching practices on student-level effects of SES on the achievement. So this study will be using as, I think I covered this a little bit before. This study will be using TIMSS 2019 in grade 8. And I will be using the 2-level linear modeling. With the first level, it's going to be the student level, and the second level is going to be the class level. And choosing class instead of school is a consideration that the teaching is normally happens in the classroom. So it more makes sense that I'm looking in the class level instead of the school level. And the dependent variable will be math achievement. In my study, I mainly focus on the two teaching practices, instructional clarity and the classroom discipline. I want to stress here is that both teaching practices are from the student survey and has been aggregated by me to the class level. And I will have a set of control variables, which are individual SES, class mean SES. The analysis is a bit standardized 2-level modeling, which has been repeated across 45 participating countries. The 45, or we could say educational system. The 45 educational system has been chosen because they are the ones that providing all of the variables, especially for instructional clarity and the classroom discipline. Singapore has to be eliminated because Singapore only provided one of those variables. So this is a short description of the SES and both teaching practices. Just get you a sense of why we are talking about the socioeconomic status, what we are recovering in my study. So it's generally is the education, number of books, and the home study supports. I'm just going to quickly cover this. So if you have any question, we can come back about what they are covering. So the instructional clarity is about how clear the teacher has been delivered, whether it's easy to understand on that kind of basis. And the classroom discipline is the student has been put into a organized and disciplined classroom with the teacher's effort. We can come back to this part. I always got questions like what are you covering in those kind of questions. So now we are directly going to the result part. So first of all, I have a set of cubes. I would like you to pay attention. Oh, you can't see my. I have an arrow here, but nobody can see. So first of all, I would like you to pay attention. Starting with, I have a set of cubes that has the ranges of whether this is a strong correlation. So I have 2 pages actually, because 45 countries is a lot. But we can see in general, the main takeaways is that the equality to accessing effective teaching are different across countries. But if you look at the cubes that are having different colors, you can see that the main effects are moderate or less strong. If we are generally have a look, you can see that all the cubes that I has been highlighted are green, which are showing that they are moderate in fact. But it has been across a lot of countries, and it has the result has been showing that the equality in opportunities to access effective teaching has been across a lot of countries. And while in this study, we have been find out two negative ones, especially I have highlighted Italy with the red front. So we have been seeing Italy has presented a negative correlation between instructional clarity and the class mean SES, which means that a classroom which with a higher level of average SES would have a lower level of instructional clarity. So it is actually presented a very good example of reallocation of good teaching to the low SES classrooms in terms of instructional clarity. So the question 2.1, while we are going to can teaching practices help reduce the learning gap? First, we are looking at the mediation effect of teaching practices at the class level. I just put a figure here, hope it's easier to understand. So I'm looking at the class level, whether the teaching practices have the mediation effect between SES and the class mean math achievement. And the table are very huge, so I'm just going to show the main result is that we did find positive mediation effect, which has been happening in 10 educational systems while we are looking at the instructional clarity. And we find more results while we are looking at the classroom discipline that we find positive mediation effect happening in 22 education systems. But we fail to find any significant result in Italy. So we are covering to the most important part, also the last part of our study, is that we are looking at the moderation effect of teaching practices on the relationship between student SES and their math achievement. And I only find very few significant results I think in general in 9 educational systems. And while here, I have to explain that I'm looking at the cross-level interaction in a 2-level modeling. So if we are looking at the negative effects, which means that this type of teaching practices can eliminate the SES achievement gap. While we are looking at the positive one, which means that instead of having a compensatory effect, actually this teaching practice with a higher level of, if we are using Jordan as an example, the first one here, if we are using Jordan as an example, we can see that in Jordan, while a classroom with a higher level of instructional clarity, or if a teacher explains his or her word well, that the students are easier to understand, we can see that actually the learning gap between high SES student and low SES student actually gets bigger. So that is a way to look at the result. In the result, we find that first we are looking at the instructional clarity. We can see that we got 3 negative results, which is what we are expecting to see, that the instructional clarity actually help reduce the learning gap. And we can see in Chile, in Italy, and in Korea. I'm very happy to find the results in Italy. That in those countries we can see that instructional clarity actually works. And while we are turning to classroom discipline, we only find one negative result where the classroom discipline can help reduce the learning gap in Moscow. So here is the focus in Italy, that Italy has been found that it is the only European countries that has shown a significant impact of classroom clarity on the SES learning gap. So I was quite interested into what happens to Italy. What is the shape of Italy across all educational systems that's been participated in TIMSS 2019? So I have a table here, and I'm not sure whether it's still clear. This is a TIMSS scale center point, and Italy just a little bit below of that center point. This is the part Singapore, Taiwan, Korea has been achieved the highest of the math in TIMSS 2019, and this is the scale center point, and Italy is just a little bit below the center point. So here are the further analysis in Italy. Sorry, I hope this is more clear. I added the last pieces last night. So the result here are all the correlations. So as we are seeing in the highest one, we can see that the correlation between the mass, individual mass, and the SES is 3.737, and at the class level, the class mean mass achievement and the class mean SES have a higher correlation or a stronger one. And then we are turning to the correlation. We are interested in the equality in opportunities. So we are seeing the class mean SES, the correlation between class mean SES and the instructional clarity. And we find out it's negative, which has been shown already. And then we fail to find out any significant result while we are looking at the equality opportunities to access to classroom discipline. So the p-value is here. So I added a more detailed one of the mediation models that we find out the path from classroom SES to teaching practices is actually negative, which is consistent with the correlation, but we fail to find any the 2 stars means is significant and is less than 0.01, and the 3 stars is less than 0.001. Sorry, this one is less organized than the previous one, but we fail to find out any indirect links from the class mean SES to mass achievement through teaching practices. So we can say that as Italy is a good example that they have managed to assign that the good teaching practices, or to be more specific, there have been reassigned the clear instructions to the classrooms with a low level of average socioeconomic status, but we fail to find any mediation effect of classroom instructions on the relationship between class mean SES and the mass achievement. So we are going to the discussion part. So in the discussion, actually starting from this trying to do international comparative studies, I was actually expecting a lot more of cross-level interactions, but the result is quite interesting, but less significant cross-level interaction instead. And I found out the positive cross-level interactions, which is more attract me with my interest, is that which means that the better quality, the larger gap. So I also named all the educational systems that would have the positive cross-level interactions. And in Jordan, so I think it will be very interesting if we can have any further studies in those educational systems to see why such things happen, why a better clear instructions would benefit more of the high SES students. And but those results doesn't mean that those are not good teaching practices for the student learning in the classroom. But it also make us think that we need to try to identify the teaching practices that would better serve the disadvantaged student. And I personally have a little bit thinking about why the positive correlation interact happens. Is that it's more likely, if we're using Jordan as an example, it's more likely sometimes the instruction is clear for students from high socioeconomic status because their parents, they come from wealthy, well-educated parents, and their parents are equipped them with self-confidence, with ability to understand teacher, to decode teacher's instruction, and to follow teacher or encounter with teacher when they have any questions. So the instructional clarity sometimes, maybe not even the items we are looking at here, but sometimes when we are talking about the instructional clarity, we need to think about clear for who. whether it is clear for the student from the low socioeconomic status. So this is a bit personal thinking from my discussion, is that while positive interactions happens, it's because these teaching practices doesn't work for low SES students. And even we are talking about very basic teaching practices, instructional clarity, it can be only clear for students from wealthy families. And we are also, on my study, I'm looking at the grade 8. And it could be a little bit late to look at grade 8 as it is a later time in student study career. And I noticed that a bit of study has been looked at the 4th grade, which the teacher might have more impact on student learning, and because it's a very early stage of student learning. So it's last about the limitations and the future research. Is that I'm using the student ratings to create the two type of instructional teaching practices, but we can review the measurement that TIMSS also provided teacher ratings, and there has been argument about the reliability between of the student ratings and the teachers' ratings. And one thing which have my notice is that the teaching skills in TIMSS measurement is actually looking at the frequency instead of the quality. So sometimes when we are looking at the frequency, the more frequent this behavior shows, or the student notices this behavior, don't directly pointed to the quality of teaching. So the teacher has been explained herself quite a lot, or the teacher is quite easy to understand, not necessarily means that this is a good level of teaching practices. I think I just said that wrong. But it does make me think about two types of future studies. And one of the ones that I have been currently working on is the non-linear relationship between the teaching practices and their achievement, as it has TIMSS has been using the frequency, which makes me think about where we all looking at the linear relationship between the teaching practices and their achievement. Whether this could be changed a little bit and the result could be different if we assume that this is a non-linear relationship between teaching practices and the achievement. It could be math or different types. So this is in general my study, and